and looks at the potential hazards and the potential risks and is able to identify them. And what happens when they find a risk is that they'll get a pop-up window which will ask questions about it. So it was described to me by one of the designers as essentially objective testing in context. So the whole virtual world thing is quite nice, I think, because it allows you to actually look around and to emulate the real world idea of, okay, there's a wheelchair blocking a door, that might potentially be a hazard. But what I particularly like about this is it's not, despite the fact it's done in the game, it's not automatically marked. What the game produces is an exam script, which would be exactly the same type of script as is produced using the traditional exam format. And this is manually marked, as before, by a marker. The reason for this is because the way in which it is assessed is not linear. So it's not a case of here's a question and that question doesn't impact upon anything else. So because you don't know which order somebody's going to walk around, what they might identify as a risk first, what they might identify as a secondary risk, it does need an actual human intervention to go in and look at how different risks relate to each other. Okay, so I hope I've kind of skimmed over those case studies because I'm aware that the time is moving on, but I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour for the different ways in which different types of assessment can be used both to assess in-game and out-of-game. So I'd just like to finish by reiterating some key messages. First, one of the key things is that it's really, really important that assessment is appropriate for learning activities and learning outcomes. And actually, this isn't to do with games-based learning. This is Assessment 101, but it gets lost, I think, when people start talking about games and getting onto the games hype bandwagon. Game-based assessment does, in-game assessment, particularly looks like it might be a solve-all. Offers automatic marking, students love it, they can be assessed without even knowing they're being assessed. I really think this is quite troubling. It's not an easy answer. Because without space to reflect in the game, to understand what's being learned, why it's being assessed, how it's being assessed, and how to apply it, I think it's very, very limited what the value of games. But finally, I believe that a creative and integrated, innovative approach to the design of assessment, with the mindset that it's a learning tool and not a testing tool, predominantly, is key to developing effective and meaningful assessment of game-based learning. So that's me. I thank you very much for letting me essentially rant for an hour, and thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to hang around and take any more questions. Also,
could I just jump in? Excuse me, Nick. Yeah. If I just jump in, I really, as you say, I hope there's going to be quite some questions. I'm just going to, guys, for those that are still in the room, which is 20 of you, I'm going to change across to a survey. Could I please ask you to multitask like the students can and actually fill out the survey while you ask questions or listen to the answers? So I'm going to swap that over now, and please put your hand up and grab a mic and ask Nick a question. Please fill it out and ask some questions.
Do you want to go, Chad?
Yes. Thanks, Nicola, for a fantastic presentation. A comment and a question. I really liked the way you were not giving the kind of prescriptive advice you often see about games. That you often see that, you know, commercial off-the-shelf products are bad and shouldn't be used for learning, or you often hear that, or sometimes hear that, you know, assessment should always be done in the game environment for it to be authentic and all that sort of thing. So I really like the nuances that you were talking about there. My question, though, is about something I've read a little bit about, but I really have real trouble getting my head around, and wondering if you know much about evidence-centered design and that kind of approach to assessment in games. My understanding is that it's been used predominantly in in Cisco networking learning. But I mean, I've read some stuff about it, and I just can't get my head around it. I'm wondering if you have any insights that can help me.
I'm afraid not. To be honest, I've never even heard the term before. I think possibly my main background is to do with games in higher education. I wouldn't say that I actually even know very much about their use and training, which is aspect where the Cisco comes in. So I'm afraid I have to hold my hands up on that one and go, no, I really can't help.
Okay, no problem. Fine. Thanks for that.
Hi, Amanda.
I'm wondering, I'm thinking, I'm in the area of nursing, and there are a lot of nursing games out there. Have you heard much about feedback about how they relate to real life practice and whether they give the nursing students a chance to reflect on what they're learning and why it's important?
Again, I'm not familiar with nursing games particularly. I think, and this is probably true for all types of games, that it's not about being prescriptive. And it's very much, if a game is basically taken off the shelf as those who produce games would like them to be, and used in a teaching situation without any debriefing, without any reflection, without any activities around it, I think the value is quite limited. So I'd have to say that the value of a game is not intrinsic in the game itself, but it's very much to do with how it's used and applied by the teacher, which is something I think that gets lost in quite a lot that's written about game-based learning. In the same way that a book has only a certain amount of value, it's how it gets applied with activities around it by whoever's using it to teach. So I'm afraid it's a bit of a vague, woolly answer, but again, games for nursing isn't something I know a great deal about.
Okay. The reason I sort of mentioned this is, I suppose, not that it was a main teaching tool in itself. It was actually a supplementary tool that was based around a core nursing curriculum where they had real practice in clinics and hospitals. So I think it wouldn't actually fall under the category of making that mistake of just assessing using a game and not using a classroom context to sort of give meaning to the activity.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's being used in a sensible way to complement what's going on in real life. And I think that's the thing. If you're getting real life experience and you have somewhere to kind of ground what's going on in the game in real life and to link it and you see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, then that's fine. But I think if people only have the experience of the game, then that's when it starts getting troubling, because without the kind of criticality of being able to relate that and think, well, actually the game's not right, I think we're losing something.
Note, Nick, that James is asking you to talk about your book. How about that?
Oh, well, thank you. I really wasn't going to actually mention it.
Plug it, please.
It does have a sense.
Chad says it all.
Plug it. I'll study signed copies if you ask. It's called Learning with Digital Games. It was published by Routledge last year. I don't know how much it costs, but you can get it on Amazon. And it does have a chapter which is looking at assessment in games and evaluation. If you're buying it for that, to be honest, I wouldn't bother because I've probably said it all this morning. But if you're buying it for all the other fact-filled chapters, then it's probably worth it.
Yeah, put the text.